I never thought my twin sister Lila would manage to turn her wedding day into the most humiliating moment of my life. But as I stood beneath the soaring white arches of the Charleston Seaside Resort, surrounded by crystal chandeliers, imported roses, and $1,000 string quartet, I realized she had done exactly that. From the moment I arrived, it was painfully clear that I was nothing more than a shadow in her perfectly choreographed fairy tale, a background prop she tolerated simply because tradition required a maid of honor. Guests arrived in shimmering dresses and tailored suits, laughing and sipping champagne as they moved through the grand courtyard. Every time I stepped near a cluster of people, conversations dropped to whispers. Many did not even bother hiding their curious glances, and some looked right past me as if I were invisible. My parents were no different. My mother gave me a distracted nod when I walked in, her eyes already darting toward Lila. My father, who had once carried both of us on his shoulders at the beach when we were children, barely acknowledged me. He brushed a piece of lint from his suit sleeve and murmured something about making sure I did not ruin the seating arrangement. Lila, meanwhile, floated through the courtyard like a princess carved from sugar and confidence. Her ivory gown shimmered with every step. The train extended several feet behind her, held up by two bridesmaids who behaved like personal attendants rather than friends. When she finally approached me, her eyes scanned me the way a designer inspects a flawed piece of fabric. "You are wrinkled," she said quietly while adjusting a curl beside her flawless cheek. "You should have steamed the dress before coming." I bit my tongue. She had chosen the dress for me, a pale gold satin slip that clung to every insecurity I had. I did not argue. I never argued with Lila, not since we were 8 years old, and she pulled me from a lake after I slipped on a mossy rock and fell into the water. She had wrapped her arms around me, dragged me back to the dock, and told me through chattering teeth that I owed her my life. For years after that, she reminded me of it whenever she wanted something. I used to believe she said it jokingly. Today, I was not so sure. During the outdoor photo shoot, the wedding photographer adjusted his camera and said to Lila, smiling brightly, "I will make sure your sister looks great next to you." Lila leaned forward and whispered something into his ear. The photographer gave me a brief, uncomfortable glance. When he walked away, my curiosity pushed me to step closer to where he had set down his camera bag. I heard him mutter under his breath while checking the preview screen. "Reduce her in the group shots. The bride said she ruins symmetry." My stomach tightened. I moved back before anyone noticed me listening. Throughout the afternoon, Lila barked orders at me the way people command a stagehand to move props. "Adjust the veil. Fix the table cards. Bring me water. Where are my flowers?" She even snapped her fingers at one point. When I hesitated for a second too long, she hissed, "Lydia, stop being difficult. You know this day is not about you." Guests were seated for the ceremony, and as the wedding planner announced it was time to prepare for the bridal entrance, Lila turned to me with a forced smile that did not reach her eyes. "Walk behind me, but not too close, and please do not look nervous. It makes my pictures look uneven." My cheeks heated with embarrassment as two bridesmaids smirked. I tried to steady my breathing. All I had to do was make it through the ceremony and the reception. I told myself it was only one day. But humiliation has a way of finding you even when you try to disappear. As the music began, I accidentally stepped half a beat early, startling one of the bridesmaids. Lila, noticing the tiny misstep, spun toward me in front of the entire courtyard. "What is wrong with you? Now! You ruined the timing." And right there, under an arch draped with white orchids in front of nearly 100 guests, my twin sister lifted her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound echoed sharp and humiliating. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. My mother covered her mouth. My father froze. The bridesmaids exchanged stunned looks. The string quartet faltered mid-note. I felt heat spread through my cheeks, not just from the sting, but from the shame that flooded every part of me. I blinked hard, fighting tears. Lila did not apologize. She simply smoothed her veil, adjusted her bouquet, and walked forward with the poise of someone who had just corrected a minor inconvenience, rather than struck her own sister. I stood still, feeling both exposed and invisible. Then my phone vibrated in my hand. The screen showed a name I almost never saw: Marcus Ellery. Lila's boss. I hesitated before answering. Marcus rarely contacted me directly. "Lydia," he said, his voice low, urgent, and trembling. "Listen carefully. Do not leave the ceremony with anyone. Come to my office as soon as you can slip away. And Lydia, do not tell your family. You need to see this. You are in danger." My breath caught in my throat. I asked what he meant, but he cut me off. "Not over the phone. Please. Come now." The line went dead. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I looked up at the wedding guests, the whispered gossip, the stares, the artificial smiles. Something inside me shifted. Without waiting for the ceremony to begin again, I stepped back from the arch, ignored the shocked murmurs, and walked away. I felt dozens of eyes burning into my back. The humiliation clung to me like a wet sheet, but something darker and heavier pressed beneath it. If Marcus Ellery was warning me, if he said I was in danger, then whatever was happening today was bigger than an embarrassing moment in a wedding. I left the courtyard, tears blurring the edges of the world around me, and headed for the parking lot, unsure of what waited for me, but certain that staying any longer would cost me more than my dignity. Growing up with a twin sister sounds idyllic to most people, but my childhood with Lila was never the storybook version outsiders imagined. When we were young, everyone said we looked identical, but the older we grew, the more it became obvious that we were opposite forces sharing the same house. Lila was sunlight, I was shadow. She was loud, charming, magnetic, the kind of child adults adored instantly. I was quiet, observant, cautious. The child teachers forgot was in the room until attendance time. Even at school events, other parents would compliment my mother on her beautiful daughter, while their eyes skipped over me as though I were an echo instead of a person. Lila thrived in attention, and I learned early that fading into the background created fewer problems. Our parents claimed they treated us equally, but children sensed the truth long before adults admit it. When Lila earned a trophy, it went on the mantel. When I earned a certificate, my mother tucked it into a drawer. When Lila brought home friends, my father bought snacks and drinks and joked with them. When I brought home a friend, he asked why we were making noise in the living room. Everything about our family dynamic taught me not to expect applause. Yet despite the imbalance, Lila and I were inseparable. She pulled me into her world whether I wanted it or not. She liked to say we were two halves of one whole and acted as though that gave her ownership over me. She chose my clothes for picture day. She told me what hairstyle looked best on both of us. She even corrected the way I laughed when she decided it sounded too awkward. I do not know when admiration turned into obligation, but I remember the exact moment she cemented her power over me. We were 8. Our parents had taken us to a lake outside Savannah. I slipped off a mossy rock while chasing a dragonfly and plunged into the deep end. The shock of cold water stole my breath. I thrashed, panicked, unable to find the surface. Everything turned into muffled roaring and frantic movement. Then, out of nowhere, arms wrapped around me, pulling me upward. Lila dragged me back to the dock, coughing and pale, and for the rest of the day she held on to me as though she were the guardian of my borrowed life. When I thanked her, she looked at me in a way I still cannot fully describe. It was pride mixed with something sharper. "You owe me your life now," she said. I laughed at the time because I thought she was joking, but she repeated it so often over the years that I eventually stopped laughing. Every time she wanted something from me, she would tilt her head and say, "Remember, I saved you. You should be grateful." Gratitude became the chain she wrapped around my decisions. As we entered adulthood, the gap between us widened. Lila excelled in college, built an impressive career, traveled, made connections, earned promotions. I worked hard too, but my path was not glamorous. While she chased ambition, I chased stability. I married Darren, a man who looked gentle on the outside, but carried a storm inside him. At first, Lila supported us. She helped plan the wedding and stood by me during the reception, twirling proudly during our twin dance. But marriage revealed a darker truth I had not seen. Darren grew controlling within months. He criticized my clothes, my friendships, my routines. He monitored my messages. He picked fights over tiny things. The first time he shoved me against the kitchen counter, he cried afterward and begged for forgiveness. I convinced myself it was stress from work. The second time, he grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises. I wrapped my arm in a long-sleeve shirt and told myself he did not mean it. The third time, he slapped me across the face in our bedroom, and I stared at the wall for a long moment before deciding to go to my sister. I showed up at Lila's apartment with darkened bruises and shaking hands. She did not hesitate. She sat me down, pressed an ice pack against my cheek, and demanded to know everything. When I told her the truth, she did not let me go home. She insisted that I stay with her for 2 nights. She even lied to our parents, telling them I was sick and needed rest. For the first time in a long time, I felt protected by her. That memory hurt more than any bruise Darren left. Because the girl who saved me at 8 and the woman who sheltered me from my husband could not possibly be the same woman who slapped me at her wedding in front of strangers. But time changes people. Or maybe time simply reveals them. After I left Darren for good, I expected Lila would stay close. But she drifted away instead. She built her dream career, earned recognition in her field, and stopped returning my calls as often. Whenever we met, she seemed distracted, as though my presence interrupted the curated rhythm of her life. When she got engaged, I thought things might shift back towards sisterhood. I imagined wedding planning sessions, late-night phone calls about flowers and venues, bonding moments like the ones we had growing up. Instead, she treated me like a paid assistant. She criticized my ideas, dismissed my suggestions, and changed the subject whenever I tried to bring up anything personal. She no longer wanted a sister. She wanted an accessory, and I allowed it because I still clung to the 8-year-old memory of her pulling me from water. I convinced myself she cared beneath the perfection and control. I convinced myself she was simply stressed. Now, after the slap at her wedding and the terrifying call from her boss, everything from our childhood through adulthood churned inside me like a puzzle snapping into place. I tried to recall any sign that she might hate me, envy me, or fear me, but nothing fit. Only one truth echoed through my mind as I drove away from the resort. Someone who once saved my life was now the person whose wedding day had shattered it, and whatever Marcus wanted to show me would explain why. I drove through Charleston with both hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles went white, trying to steady the storm that had swallowed my mind since the moment Marcus Ellery's voice crackled through the phone with that chilling warning. The sun was beginning to lower over the horizon, turning the harbor water gold, but I barely noticed the scenery. My thoughts kept circling the same terrifying loop. Why would Lila's boss call me? What danger could possibly involve me on her wedding day? And why had he emphasized not telling my family? The closer I got to Marcus's office, the more the world around me felt distorted, like I was walking through a memory rather than reality. I parked in the garage beneath the glass high-rise and forced myself to breathe. My reflection in the elevator doors startled me. Mascara smudged from crying lipstick faded a faint red mark still visible on my cheek from Lila's slap. I wiped my face with a tissue, straightened the wrinkled gold dress, and stepped inside the elevator. By the time I reached the 24th floor, my pulse was so loud in my ears that I barely heard the soft ding announcing my arrival. The hallway was quiet, lined with framed photographs of company achievements and employees of the month. I had only been to Marcus's office once before to drop off a birthday card for Lila from our parents. This time felt completely different. High stakes lingered in the air like static. I knocked softly. The door opened almost instantly. Marcus, normally composed and confident, stood before me looking like a man who had not slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled. He glanced up and down the hallway before quickly ushering me inside. "Thank you for coming, Lydia." His voice trembled despite his attempt to hide it. As soon as the door shut, he locked it, slid the bolt across, and reached up to turn off the small security camera above the filing cabinet. That alone made my pulse spike. Marcus lowered the blinds, then motioned for me to sit. I had never seen a corporate office transformed into a bunker before. He sat across from me, clasping his shaking hands together. "I know this must be confusing," he said, "and I am sorry I disrupted your sister's wedding day, but I had no choice. Something is very wrong, and I could not let you walk into what was coming next." I swallowed hard. What is going on? What danger was he talking about? He hesitated, studying my face the way a doctor examines a patient before delivering bad news. "I need you to promise you will stay calm." I stared at him. Just tell me." He exhaled slowly, reached for the lower drawer of his desk, and pulled out a thick folder bound with a rubber band. He laid it between us. "Lydia," he said quietly, "your sister initiated something 3 days ago. Something involving you. Something that should never have been processed." My chest tightened. He slid the folder toward me. "Inside, you will find documents that look legitimate, but they are not." Carefully, almost fearfully, I removed the rubber band and opened the folder. The first page made my heart drop. It was a life insurance policy. A very large one. $750,000. My name was printed as the insured individual, and the beneficiary was listed as Lila Hale. My breath hitched. I pushed the document back toward him. "I never signed this." Marcus nodded grimly. "I know. Your signature was forged." I stared at the page again. The signature was almost identical to mine. Same slant, same looping letters. If I had not been the one looking at it even, I might have believed I had signed it. He reached into the folder again and pulled out another document. This one stamped with the company's HR department header. "3 days ago, Lila requested access to your genetic records." My mind jolted. My genetic what? Marcus pressed his lips together. "When employees undergo certain medical screenings, the company maintains encrypted DNA-related files. It is part of the research and development program. You and your sister participated voluntarily a few years ago." I remembered vaguely. Lila had convinced me to do it with her because it was free and she wanted to compare results for fun. I never thought about it again. Why would she need my DNA? Marcus pulled up his computer screen and clicked a folder labeled Audit Flagged Files. A request from Lila popped up dated 3 days prior, marked as urgent. "She did not request her own record," he said. "She only requested yours." I could not process the information quickly enough. The forged signature on the insurance policy, the DNA request, the fact that she had done all of this right before her wedding. None of it made sense. I looked at Marcus, my throat dry. Why would she do this? Marcus stood and walked to a tall cabinet in the corner of his office. His hands shook as he entered a code on a keypad. The cabinet clicked open. He pulled out a small external hard drive and placed it gently in my hands. "Before you see what is on this, you need to understand that I did not go looking for this. Your sister's behavior raised red flags with HR, and they brought the concerns to me. When I opened her activity logs, I found things I should never have found." I whispered like, "What?" He looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. "Patterns of behavior that imply she has been planning something involving you for months." I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Something cold settled into my bones. Marcus gestured toward the screen through the window of his office and said quietly, "I know this is difficult. I wish I could tell you this is all a misunderstanding, but it is not. There are emails, there are screenshots, there are voice memos, and everything points to the same conclusion. Whatever she has been doing behind your back, it escalated this week. That insurance policy was activated the moment you arrived at the wedding." My pulse thudded painfully in my neck. Activated. As if I were a project, a target, a line item. I felt dizzy and reached for the edge of the desk to steady myself. I whispered again, "Why?" But I already sensed he did not know the full answer himself. Marcus rubbed his temples. "I called you today because you need to see the truth before it is too late, and because I am afraid you do not understand how far this has gone." He pointed to the folder. "This is only the beginning." My vision blurred and I forced myself to breathe. My twin sister had filed insurance papers on my life. She had forged my name. She had tried to access my DNA. And her boss was looking at me like I had stepped into the middle of a storm I knew nothing about. Whatever I thought the problem was between Lila and me, this was something far darker, something deliberate, something dangerous. And Marcus Ellery had only shown me the first crack in the mask she had worn her whole life. Marcus waited for several long seconds before he finally stepped away from his desk and motioned for me to follow him to the small conference room adjoining his office, a glass-walled space usually reserved for client presentations. Tonight, its frosted panels and dim lighting made it feel more like an interrogation chamber than a corporate meeting room. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as he closed the door behind us and reached into his jacket pocket for a small silver USB drive. He set it gently on the table between us, almost ceremonially, as though placing evidence at the center of a courtroom. "Lydia," he said softly, "what you are about to see is the reason I told you not to involve your family. It is also the reason I told you that you are in danger." I stared at the USB as though it were ticking. Marcus plugged it into the conference room monitor and a folder popped up with several files labeled by date. He clicked the most recent one. The screen flickered, then displayed grainy footage from what looked like a security camera. My breath caught when I realized it was the inside of the company laboratory, the same lab where Lila and I had once given DNA samples for the company's wellness study. The timestamp indicated it had been recorded 2 nights ago at almost midnight. The building was locked at that hour. No employees were scheduled. Yet there she was, my twin sister. Lila walked into the frame wearing a black hoodie, her hair tied up, her movements brisk and purposeful. She approached the biometric scanner, entered a stolen passcode, and stepped inside the refrigerated archive room where genetic samples were stored. I watched frozen as she opened a drawer labeled with patient barcodes and began rummaging through it. Then my stomach turned cold when she found a tube and held it up to the light. The label read Hail L. Marcus paused the video to look at me. "That is your record." She knew exactly what she was looking for. He pressed play again. Lila placed my sample into her pocket, then reached for another tube next to it. This one also read Hail, but the first initial was different. L. Hale, for Lila. She stared at her own sample for a long moment before smashing it on the counter. Glass scattered and the sample splattered onto the stainless steel surface. She then pulled a small device from her pocket, a portable scanner, and waved it over the shattered residue. Her breath fogged the screen slightly. The camera did not pick up audio, but her lips were moving rapidly as though she were talking to herself. Finally, she turned the device around. I could barely read the result on the tiny display, but Marcus zoomed in. The words hit me like a blow to the chest. No biological match. My mouth fell open. She destroyed her own DNA record because it revealed something she did not want anyone else to know, Marcus explained. And she took yours because it was the only remaining sample that could prove a detail she has been hiding. I shook my head slowly. It did not make sense. We were twins. Fraternal twins do not share identical DNA, but they are still biological siblings. I whispered, "That cannot be right." Marcus clicked another file, this one an audio recording from the lab's motion-triggered hallway microphone. The sound was faint at first, then sharpened as he increased the volume. Lila's voice filled the room. I knew it. I knew she wasn't really my twin. I knew something was wrong. No match. No match at all. My heart sank to my stomach. She sounded furious, panicked, unhinged. She continued in a ragged whisper. "If anyone finds out, everything falls apart. Everything I have built. Everything I deserve. They will compare us. They will ask questions. They will wonder why she is nothing like me." Her voice cracked. "I will not let her ruin this. She ruined enough." Marcus stopped the recording. He did not look at me right away, as though giving me time to absorb what I had heard. I stared at the table, my thoughts racing, tangled, impossible to grasp. No biological match, no twin. Everything I had believed about my childhood, about who I was, about who she was to me, shifted beneath my feet like unstable ground. I felt my breath shortening. Marcus sat beside me, keeping his tone calm. "A clinical error flagged your file. Your DNA profiles were run again by HR after reviewing Lila's request, and the system confirmed what she saw. You and Lila do not share biological markers consistent with twins or even siblings." My mind reeled back through memories. Childhood birthdays, matching outfits, school projects labeled the Hale twins, the lake accident, the rescue, the years of believing we were halves of one whole, all manufactured by circumstance, or by someone else's choice. Not biology. Marcus continued, "We believe Lila learned the truth by mistake after accessing your file. Instead of processing it rationally, she panicked. She feared the revelation would taint her wedding, her career, her reputation. She saw the truth as a threat. I whispered, "But why come after me? Why not confront our parents?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "Because you are the only piece of evidence left. Your DNA record is the only verification that the two of you are not biologically related. If that record disappears, the story dies, and if you disappear, the truth dies with you." A chill ran down my spine. My sister had destroyed her own genetic record and tried to steal mine. She had forged insurance documents worth nearly $1 million. She had requested access to my medical files. This was no identity crisis. She was covering a truth she believed could dismantle her perfect image. Marcus clicked another file. A scanned, handwritten note appeared on the screen. I recognized Lila's handwriting instantly. "If this is true, no one can ever know. Not her, not them, not anyone. I must protect what I built, even if it means removing the threat." The room felt smaller, tighter, airless. Marcus rubbed his jaw, his expression heavy. "There is more, but this is the heart of it. Whatever happened when she saw the mismatched DNA triggered something extreme, something that made her willing to destroy records and forge signatures, something that made her see you as a liability rather than a sister." My throat tightened. "So she thinks I am the threat?" Marcus nodded. "You are the only person who could prove the truth she is trying to bury, the truth that you are not her biological twin." I felt as though the floor beneath me cracked, sending everything I had ever known tumbling into darkness. Lila and I were never twins, not by blood, not by genetics, not by science. The bond I spent my life honoring was something she saw as a trap waiting to ruin her carefully crafted life. Marcus spoke again, his voice more urgent now. "Lydia, she destroyed her own sample 2 nights ago. She tried to access and potentially destroy yours yesterday. She filed an insurance policy on your life. None of this is normal behavior. None of this is accidental." I looked at the frozen image on the screen the moment Lila smashed her own DNA tube, her face twisted in fear and fury. Nothing about her expression looked like the sister who once dragged me from a lake. She looked like a stranger, someone who had decided I was in the way, someone who believed I held the power to destroy her, someone who might be willing to destroy me first. As the realization settled into my bones, Marcus leaned back slowly and said the words I had not yet allowed myself to think. "Whatever she is planning, she is not done, and you need to understand how far she may be willing to go." I sat frozen in the conference room chair, staring at the monitor, as though the images might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying if I blinked enough times, but the truth remained fixed and merciless. Lila had destroyed her own DNA record. She had tried to take mine. She had forged a $750,000 insurance policy on my life. And Marcus was telling me this was only the beginning. He returned to his desk, opened another folder, and slid several printed photographs across the table. I recognized the first one instantly and felt my stomach flip. It was my key ring, the one I always kept clipped to the inside of my tote bag. But in the photo, my keys were lying on Lila's kitchen counter next to a second identical set. Marcus tapped the image. "Does that look like your key ring?" I nodded. "I lost that one months ago. I thought I misplaced it at the grocery store." "You did not misplace it," he said. Lila took it. He clicked the next photo. Surveillance footage from her apartment building showed her removing something small from her pocket while standing near the garage entrance. She walked toward my car, looked around, then bent down just out of the camera's view. When she stood, she walked away briskly. Marcus enlarged the image, revealing that she had placed something next to my front left tire. A small metal object glinted faintly under the garage lights. "What is that?" "A tire valve remover," he said. "A slow leak device. If you had driven long enough, the tire would have gone flat on the highway." My breath stuttered. Why would she do that? Marcus opened another file. This time it was a video clip taken from a tiny camera in the hallway locker room at work. The footage showed Lila exchanging bottles in the employee refrigerator. One was a prescription bottle with my name on it. The other had no label. She swapped the pills quickly, scanning the room nervously. I felt my pulse racing. "That is my anxiety medication." Marcus nodded. "She replaced your medication with something else likely to influence your behavior." She emailed HR afterward and told them you were showing signs of instability. My throat tightened. Instability according to whom? According to her, Marcus said. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out for several seconds. This could not be real. This could not be my life. Watch this, Marcus said quietly. He clicked another file, a voice memo with a timestamp from 3 weeks ago. Lila's voice echoed through the room. I am telling you she is slipping. She forgets things. She panics easily. Last week she called me and did not remember doing it. She is unpredictable. She needs supervision. My jaw dropped. None of that was true. I had never called her in a panic. I had never forgotten doing anything. She was manufacturing a narrative that painted me as mentally unstable. I squeezed my hands together tightly on my lap. She is trying to make me look incompetent. Not incompetent, Marcus corrected. Unfit. He clicked another memo. This time the voice was not Lila's. It was a man's voice. Deep, familiar. My breath hitched as the words played. You know she trusts me. I can handle her. I can get the information you need. My blood ran cold at the sound of his voice. Darren, my ex-husband. I gripped the edge of the table. Why is he involved? Marcus looked genuinely pained as he answered. Because she brought him in. He clicked another file labeled Audio 4. Lila's voice came through, first low and urgent. She trusts you because you were her dark past. Use that. There was a faint clicking sound like someone pacing or flicking a lighter. Then Darren spoke again. How long do I need to follow her? Until it is done, Lila replied coldly. You will get your money when it is done. My chest tightened. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Done. What did done mean? Marcus continued. According to the bank statements we recovered before the files were wiped, Darren owes tens of thousands in gambling debt. Lila promised to pay it off if he helped build a case that you were unstable. My hands trembled. He was following me. Marcus nodded. He took photos of you leaving work, photos of you at grocery stores. He filed false incident reports claiming you were seen acting manic. He even staged a break-in near your apartment and implied to authorities that you may have been responsible but confused afterward. I stared at the table, unable to stop the flood of shame and fury rising in my chest. My ex-husband and my twin sister had worked together behind my back. One out of greed, one out of fear. Marcus clicked on one last audio file. Darren's voice came on again, this time angrier. You cannot expect me to do this without more money. She is not breaking the way you thought she would. Lila snapped back. Then make her break. I froze. My body went cold from head to toe. Marcus shut the audio off. Their plan was escalating. They were not just manipulating public perception. They were pushing towards something that could make you look mentally incompetent or even dangerous. I looked at him feeling nauseous. Why? Why is she doing all of this? Marcus straightened his posture, his expression solemn. Because you are the last remaining piece of proof she cannot control. You are the one person who can verify she is not your biological twin. If she discredits you or makes you disappear, the truth disappears with you. My vision wavered. I forced myself to breathe slowly. This is insane. Marcus nodded slowly. It is also deliberate. And it gets worse. He pulled out another sheet of paper. This one listed canceled medical appointments. 6 of them. Canceled without your knowledge. She contacted your doctor's office claiming you needed help managing your responsibilities. She told them to route all communications to her. She even requested copies of your medical files to assist with your care. I felt lightheaded. She is trying to build legal grounds to take control of your decisions. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Power of attorney. Guardianship. Elder cases like this happen more often than people realize, except usually they involve much older victims. Your case is unusual because you are still young, but the pattern is clear. Lila has been building a paper trail suggesting you are mentally unstable, and Darren has been contributing by staging incidents to support that narrative. I closed my eyes tightly, forcing tears back. Every detail of the past 6 months flickered through my mind in horrifying new context. The missing keys, the misplaced medication, the flat tire, the strange messages from numbers I did not recognize, the concern in my parents' voices when they asked if I was doing all right because Lila told them I had been forgetful. My sister had constructed an entire version of me that did not exist, a version she could point to when explaining why I needed monitoring, why she needed access to my accounts, why she needed to move me out of my apartment, why she needed to take charge of everything. My voice cracked. She wanted me out of the way. Marcus looked at me sympathetically. She does not want you out of the way emotionally. She wants you out of the way legally. You are a liability, a threat to the narrative she wants to protect. I stared at the grainy still photo of Darren on the screen, his face half shadowed as he stood near my apartment steps. I felt something deep inside me shift, a realization sharper than fear. They were not trying to ruin my life. They were trying to replace it with a version that served their purpose. They wanted me to crumble, to break, to disappear. And they came much closer than I had ever realized. I lifted my eyes to Marcus, my voice barely above a whisper. If they are doing all this behind my back, what are they planning next? Marcus inhaled slowly, his expression grave. That is what we need to find out. And we need to do it before they make their next move. The air in Marcus's office felt heavier the moment he closed the folder, as though the room understood something I had not yet put into words. I sat across from him with my hands locked tightly in my lap, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner, my pulse loud in my ears. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and rubbed his forehead with the tips of his fingers in a way that signaled something worse was coming. "Lydia," he said, "I need to tell you what happened 2 nights ago." His tone changed completely. No longer professional, no longer steady. There was a tremble in it that made the hairs on my arms rise. I watched him stand and walk to the window where he stared down at the parking lot as if replaying a memory he wished he could erase. "Someone broke into my house," he said quietly. I felt my entire body tense. "What?" He nodded without turning toward me. "I came home around 10 after working late. My living room was torn apart, couch cushions on the floor, cabinets open, desk drawers dumped out, but nothing of real value was taken." My voice caught. They were looking for something. Marcus turned to face me with a haunted expression. They were looking for the files. My throat went dry. The DNA files, the insurance documents, everything he said, anything that tied Lila to this. I swallowed hard. Did they find them? Marcus shook his head. "Not everything. They took my laptop. They pulled the hard drive out of my home server. They even smashed the external backup in my study. But they missed one thing." He walked to his desk drawer, opened it with a soft click, and took out a small silver USB drive. "This. I keep this on me at all times for private account backups, and I transferred the key files to it before they disappeared from the system." I stared at the tiny object in his hand, realizing it might be the only thing keeping me alive. My voice shook. "How do you know they were after me?" Marcus hesitated. Before they left a note. He reached back into the drawer and unfolded a crumpled piece of printer paper. It had only 6 words written in bold black marker. "Stay out of family business, Ellery." My chest tightened painfully. They knew he was helping me. Marcus nodded. "And it gets worse." He returned to his computer and pulled up the internal system logs from the company's database. The screen showed lines and lines of red error messages. Unauthorized access attempt, files corrupted, files deleted, server rollback failed. Someone hacked our system, he said. Not from outside, from somewhere internal. They erased the HR emails Lila sent, the insurance forms, the DNA test requisitions, the camera lab logs. All gone. All at once. My mind spun. Who would even know how to do that? Marcus grimaced. Someone who knew exactly what to target. I stared at him, dread building like a rising tide. "You think it was Lila?" He shook his head. "No. Lila does not have that kind of technical skill, but she could have paid someone. Or convinced someone." My skin prickled. "Darren." Marcus nodded. "He has the recklessness, the the desperation, and the motive. And he already had access to you. My fingers curled against my knees. Every time I thought I had reached the bottom of this, another layer of sickness revealed itself beneath. What happens now? Marcus took another shaky breath. Before the files were deleted, I received an email from Lila. It was sent at 3 in the morning. He turned the monitor toward me so I could read it. The message was short, almost unnervingly calm. Marcus, stop interfering. This will end badly for you. I felt a chill run straight down my spine. She threatened you. He nodded, and she did not bother to hide it behind politeness. She wants me scared. She wants you isolated. She wants control of the narrative before you know enough to stop her. I tried to speak, but only air came out. Marcus softened his voice. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you because we are officially past the point where this is family tension. This is a coordinated effort to discredit you and erase evidence. If the USB goes missing, we lose everything. My breathing turned shallow. So what do we do? Marcus sat down again, folding his hands with determination. We bring in someone who knows how to handle people who manipulate legal systems for personal gain. Detective Mara Quinn. She specializes in financial abuse, guardianship fraud, and identity tampering. I blinked. Those are real cases. More common than you think, he said, especially in messy families or situations where someone stands to gain large sums from someone else's downfall. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to steady myself. Is this really happening? Marcus looked at me firmly. Yes. And you are not imagining it. You are not unstable. You are not confused. Everything you have felt in the last few months was engineered to make you question yourself just long enough for them to rebuild your life on paper. That last sentence hit me like a shovel to the ribs. Rebuild your life on paper. The idea that my sister and my ex-husband had been crafting a false version of me made my skin crawl. Marcus leaned forward. We cannot undo what they have already erased, but we can protect what is left. We need to verify the remaining files, create additional backups, and prepare to hand everything to law enforcement. My voice trembled. What if they come after you again? Marcus shook his head with a brittle smile. That is already a risk, but I will not look the other way. Not when someone is manipulating systems I am responsible for. Not when someone is using their position to push a person toward legal ruin. And not when a woman is being targeted by people who claim to love her. I stared at him, overwhelmed by gratitude and fear and disbelief all tangled together. I wanted to speak, but my voice was trapped behind the weight of everything he had revealed. Marcus tapped the USB on the table. This is the turning point, Lydia. You either step back and let them finish what they started, or you stand up and make sure this ends before it gets any worse. I felt something shift deep inside me, a kind of clarity I had not felt in months. They wanted me broken. They wanted me confused. They wanted me silent. I looked at Marcus and found my voice again, quiet but steady. I am not going to disappear. Marcus nodded slowly, relief flickering through his eyes. Good, because they are not stopping, and neither are we. I sat still for several seconds after Marcus finished speaking, the buzzing in my ears louder than the air conditioner and the hum of distant conversation in the hallway. Something inside me had changed in the last hour. Something that was no longer soft or scared or waiting for someone else to fix what had been broken. I was still terrified, but fear was no longer the only thing in the room with me. Determination was pulling up a chair beside it. Marcus sensed the shift in my posture. We need help, Lydia. Real help. I nodded, even though the idea of telling anyone else made the back of my neck prickle. If Lila had infiltrated a corporate server, hired my ex-husband, and forged my signature with surgical precision, then she was operating far beyond the emotional sabotage I grew up with. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number he apparently knew by heart. Detective Mara Quinn, please. The receptionist transferred him immediately. A moment later, a steady, controlled voice answered. Quinn. Marcus said I need to report suspected financial manipulation, identity tampering, and potential insurance fraud linked to a family member of an employee. I was surprised by how calm he sounded. He was speaking as if he did this every day, as if there was nothing unusual about confronting a web of fraud orchestrated by a woman in a wedding dress. When he hung up, he turned to me. "She is coming here." I pressed my fingers into my palms, grounding myself. "A police detective. Am I ready for that?" "You need documentation," Marcus said gently. "You need a chain of custody. You need legal protection." I exhaled shakily. "Yes, I do." 20 minutes later, a woman with a sharp navy blazer, dark jeans, and an expression that suggested she had seen every variation of human deceit walked through the glass door. Detective Quinn introduced herself with a firm handshake. Marcus briefed me. "Are you all right?" I hesitated, unsure how to answer. She studied me carefully. "You look like someone who has been doubting her own reality for months." "That is common in cases like this." Even her voice was grounding. I nodded slowly. "I need to know what to do next." She motioned for Marcus to bring out the USB. "We start by creating controlled copies documenting timestamps and protecting the evidence before anyone can tamper with it." She plugged it into her encrypted laptop and began scanning. Her brows lifted slightly as she flipped through files. "That is a lot of coordinated activity. Most people who commit fraud leave traces. Your sister leaves essays." I felt my stomach twist. "Is this enough to arrest her?" Quinn shook her head. "Not yet, but it is enough to start an investigation. And it is enough to set a trap." My pulse quickened. "A trap." Quinn looked at me directly. "She will escalate. People like her always escalate when they feel the narrative slipping out of their hands. She does not want you stable. She does not want you credible. She wants you under her control. How do we stop her? We make her reveal herself." Marcus leaned forward. "I have an idea." He typed quickly on his laptop. "We send her an email. From Lydia. From me." Quinn nodded. "Exactly. We use her confidence against her. She thinks she is still 2 steps ahead. Let her believe it." Marcus turned the screen toward us. A draft email was open. It looked simple. "I think I understand why you were worried about me. I am ready to sign whatever you need. Can we meet privately in your office?" I felt my throat close. "If we send that, she will come running." "Precisely," Quinn said. "She wants control. This email tells her she has it." My hands trembled slightly. "But she will not come alone." Marcus frowned. "Darren." Quinn nodded once. "Good. We want him there. The more players in the room, the more we catch in one shot." I felt a wave of nausea. What if they try to hurt me? Quinn leaned forward, her voice calm and deliberate. "We will never leave you alone. You will wear a recording device. I will have 2 officers in the hallway. Marcus will be in the room with you. The goal is not confrontation. The goal is confession." My breaths came shorter. "Confession." "Yes," Quinn said. "We need her to say it. The insurance, the DNA tampering, the emotional manipulation, the staged incidents. We need her to verbalize her intentions and her motivations. And with the right pressure, she will." Marcus added Lila always cracks under unpredictability. If things do not go exactly the way she planned, she spirals. It was surreal hearing them speak about my sister as if she were a hostile subject in an interrogation file. But the truth was that she had crossed every boundary imaginable. And the person she had chosen as her target was me. I swallowed hard. "When do we do it?" Quinn pulled out her phone. "Tonight. The wedding reception will keep her busy until late evening. She will be anxious, distracted, arrogant. That combination makes people reckless." Marcus typed quickly. "I will schedule a fake meeting request for 9 p.m. I will make it look like a room reservation for a confidential document signing." Quinn turned to me. "Lydia, I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared to sit across from your sister and your ex-husband and let them believe they have won just long enough for them to incriminate themselves?" My chest tightened. Memories flashed in my mind. Lila holding my hand at 8 years old as I coughed lake water. Lila covering the bruises left by Darren so our parents would not worry. Lila hugging me after my divorce, telling me she understood. And now Lila forging documents to erase me legally. Lila hiring Darren to stalk me. Lila manipulating everyone who ever tried to help me. I lifted my chin slowly. Yes, I am ready. Quinn nodded once satisfied. Then let us set the stage. Marcus sent the email. The moment he pressed send, a strange mix of fear and adrenaline surged through me. It felt like stepping off a cliff and trusting the air to hold me. Quinn handed me a small recording device. Slip this into your jacket pocket. It activates automatically when it detects voices within arm's reach. She demonstrated the blinking pattern. If anything happens, my officers will be outside that door. I nodded. My voice was quiet but steady. Thank you. Quinn gave me a small, reassuring smile. You are not alone in this anymore. Marcus printed documents for the setup. A table was arranged in the small conference room next door. Chairs were angled to create pressure points in the room layout. Every detail mattered. The lighting, the placement of the USB, the position of the chairs. Quinn coached us. Do not confront. Do not justify. Let them fill the silence. People who manipulate always rush to control the narrative. Give them space and they will reveal themselves. Hours passed slowly. The sun dipped below the skyline. The campus lights flickered on outside the windows. My palms were sweating, but I kept rehearsing Quinn's instructions in my mind. When 9 p.m. approached, Marcus checked his phone. He looked at me with a mix of sympathy and grim assurance. She is on her way. My stomach dropped. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and felt the small recording device press against my ribs. Quinn's voice echoed in my mind. This is where the tide turns. This is where you stop being the target and start being the truth. I inhaled deeply and followed Marcus to the conference room, every step feeling like the beginning of something I had not yet allowed myself to imagine. Control, clarity, justice. Tonight would decide all three. The sky over the Charleston resort had turned into a dark velvet curtain by the time I stepped outside to clear my head before the staged meeting, the warm night air brushing against my cheeks, as if trying to steady me for what was coming, but nothing in the air or the glow of the garden lanterns could prepare me for the sound of hurried footsteps behind me. Lydia. I froze. That voice. I turned slowly, and there she was, still in her wedding gown. The train slightly dirtied from running across the stone path, mascara streaking down her cheeks like ink washing off a painting left out in the rain, her chest rising and falling as she tried to catch her breath. Darren stepped out from the shadows behind her, his dress shirt untucked, sweat beading along his hairline. My pulse slammed against my ribs. Why are you here? I asked, my voice small but sharp. Lila laughed, but it was not light, not joyful, not anything resembling the sister I once knew. It was jagged brittle, something broken pretending to be whole. Because you ruined my day, she spat. You could not stay away, could you? You had to make today about you. I stared at her in disbelief. Lila, I left quietly. I did not want to cause a scene. Her eyes flashed. You already did. You always do. Everything collapses the moment you show up. You think I did not see the way people looked at me after I slapped you. You think I did not hear the whispers. I swallowed hard. You hit me, in front of 200 people. She waved her hand dismissively. You provoked me. You embarrassed me. You have been embarrassing me since we were children. I felt my breath hitch. That is not fair. She stepped closer, so close I could see the tiny tremor in the corner of her mouth. Fair is not the point. Control is. I blinked, unsure if I heard her correctly. Control. Darren moved to block my path as I instinctively tried to step back. He leaned in, slightly lowering his voice so only I could hear. Your sister is having a rough night. You should do what she says. The smell of alcohol on his breath made my stomach twist. Lila grabbed my wrist so hard I gasped. You were never supposed to come today, she hissed. And you definitely were not supposed to talk to Marcus. My blood ran cold. How do you know I talked to him? She tightened her grip. Because he called someone he should not have, and that someone told me everything. My heart pounded violently. You broke into his house. Lila's expression flickered, shifting between rage and something like panic. He should have minded his business. I yanked my wrist back. What business is that, Lila? The truth. A silent tear ran down her cheek, cutting a clean line through her smeared makeup. You always ruin things. You ruined my engagement when you refused to lie for me. You ruined my job by telling HR I used your login. You ruined our family by refusing to let things go. Everything would be perfect if you just disappeared for one day. The words hit me like a slap. I whispered, "Is that why you forged my signature?" She stiffened. "Is that why you stole my DNA?" Her jaw clenched. "You were not supposed to find out." "Not yet." I felt my voice crack. "Why, Lila? Why would you do that to me?" She stepped back, her hands shaking. "Because you were never meant to be here." The doctors mixed up the test. You and I were never really identical. I learned that months ago. My chest tightened painfully. Then why not talk to me? Because she shouted and her voice echoed across the quiet garden. Because if people know, then everything I have goes away. The perfect twin image. The perfect wedding. The perfect life. You ruined symmetry, Lydia. You always have. I stared at her, stunned at the cruelty of the words. I ruined symmetry. That is what this was about. She was unraveling before my eyes like a seam ripped open under too much pressure. Lila stumbled forward, grabbing the front of my dress, her nails digging into the fabric. I tried so hard to tolerate you, to protect you, to let you exist beside me without destroying everything I built, but you keep showing up. You keep surviving. The last word made my breath hitch. Surviving. Lila's voice dropped to a whisper, trembling and raw. Do you know what it is like to save someone's life and spend the next 20 years regretting it? My chest heaved. She leaned in closer, her forehead almost touching mine. I should have let you drown that day. My knees nearly buckled. Darren moved behind me, placing his hand on my shoulder, pressing just hard enough to keep me from stepping away. She does not mean that he said, but his tone was so insincere that it only made everything worse. Lila yanked me again. Do not defend me, she snapped at him. You were supposed to take care of this. He tensed. I am trying, not hard enough. She turned back to me with a menace I had never seen in her eyes before. You were supposed to sign the papers tonight. You were supposed to agree you could not care for yourself. You were supposed to let me have control, Lydia. That was the plan. My heart thundered. You planned this, all of it. She nodded once, unblinking. You have always been the weaker one, the messy one, the anxious one. It was not hard to make people believe you needed supervision. You were halfway to falling apart anyway. I shook my head, tears filling my eyes. That is not true. She tightened her fingers around my arm until I cried out softly. Stop lying to yourself. You were born to break. I opened my mouth to respond when a voice behind us cut through the night air. Are you ladies all right? A resort employee holding a tray of glasses approached, concern etched across his face. Lila dropped my arm immediately and stepped back as if stung. Her entire expression transformed in an instant. Her shoulders relaxed. Her mouth curved into a tremulous, convincing smile. She even let out a shaky laugh. Oh, thank you for checking, she said sweetly. My sister had a bit too much to drink. I stiffened. That is not true. Lila placed a hand on her chest dramatically. She is embarrassed. Family tension. You know how emotional wedding nights can be. The employee's eyes shifted between us, uncertain. Do you need me to call security? Lila gasped softly. Oh no, please. She grabbed my hand, holding it lightly now as if we had been sisters sharing a tender moment instead of a violent one. She squeezed, gently warning me with her nails pressing into my skin. Everything is fine. I forced myself to breathe normally, terrified that any word from me would escalate the situation before the detective arrived. The employee hesitated, nodded awkwardly, and stepped away. As soon as he was out of sight, Lila's sweetness evaporated like steam. Her eyes hardened again. You will come with us, now. Darren unlocked the back door of a dark sedan and gestured for me to get in. I stepped back. No. Lila's expression twisted into something volcanic. You do not get to say no, not anymore. I backed away another step, then another, my heart pounding as adrenaline surged through every nerve. And then, without thinking, without planning, without anything except raw instinct, I turned and ran. I heard Lila scream my name behind me, heard Darren cursing as he sprinted after me, heard the fabric of Lila's wedding dress tearing as she tried to chase me down the garden path. But I did not stop. I bolted through the resort gate across the dimly lit walkway through the side entrance that led to the employee parking lot. My lungs burned, my legs shook, but I kept going until I burst onto the sidewalk outside Marcus's building. By the time I reached the office door, tears were streaming down my face. My dress was torn at the shoulder, and my pulse hammered so violently it felt like it might crack my ribs. Marcus opened the door the moment I knocked, his eyes widening at the sight of me. "Lydia, what happened?" I shook my head, breathless. "They found me. They tried to take me." Marcus guided me inside quickly. "Detective Quinn is already waiting. And now," he said firmly as he locked the door, "it is our turn." The conference room felt colder than it had earlier, as if the air itself sensed what was about to happen and was holding its breath. My hands shook as Marcus guided me toward the chair closest to the wall, the safest place in the room, according to Detective Quinn's earlier instructions. She was already standing near the corner with her arms crossed and her posture controlled, but alert, her gaze sweeping over every detail of the environment like she was mentally mapping the exits, the angles, and the risk points. When she looked at me, her voice was low but firm. "You did the right thing coming straight here." I nodded, though the tremor in my knees betrayed the fragile state I was in. I kept touching the small recording device hidden inside my jacket pocket, making sure it was still there, still blinking, still ready to capture everything. Marcus checked the clock. They should be arriving any minute. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten as the memories of the confrontation at the resort replayed behind my eyes. Lila's hands clawing at my dress. Darren's pressure on my shoulder. Her voice telling me I was born to break. Quinn stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Remember, you do not confront. You do not explain. You let them talk. You let their ego and desperation do the work." I forced myself to breathe through the panic rising in my chest. She saw me. She saw my terror. And for a moment, her expression softened. "This ends tonight, Lydia." The words steadied me more than I expected, because for the first time in months, there was someone who believed me enough to fight with me. A sudden knock at the door snapped all of us to attention. Marcus walked over and opened it just enough to allow two shadows to slip inside. Lila stepped in first. Her wedding dress was wrinkled and smeared with dirt near the hem, her makeup ruined but freshly reapplied in a frantic attempt to hide the damage. Her hair was still pinned, though several strands had fallen loose around her face. She did not look like a bride anymore. She looked like a woman unraveling thread by thread. Darren followed behind her, his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the room with a calculating coldness that made my skin crawl. The moment Lila saw me sitting at the table, she froze. Her expression shifted so quickly it seemed impossible it belonged to the same person I had escaped from earlier. "Lydia," she said softly, her voice trembling in a carefully rehearsed mix of worry and pity. "Oh my gosh, what happened to your dress? You look shaken. Did someone hurt you?" I stared at her in disbelief. The transformation was terrifying. She stepped toward me with wet eyes and trembling hands. "You disappeared from the reception. Darren and I were searching everywhere. We thought something terrible happened to you." Darren nodded solemnly, playing along. "We were really worried." Lila reached for my hand. I pulled back before she could touch me. Her face flickered with something sharp before she forced a soft smile again. "Sweetheart, it is okay. We are here now. Everything will be fine." Marcus cleared his throat and gestured toward the chairs on the opposite side of the table. "Please sit. We have a few documents to go over." Lila's eyes darted toward him, and a flicker of recognition passed through them. She knew. She knew exactly what Marcus had done, but she hid it behind an expression of polite curiosity. Documents. She sat gracefully smoothing the ruined skirt of her wedding gown as though she was still in a ballroom instead of a trap. Darren sat beside her, leaning back in his chair with the smugness of someone who believed he was untouchable. Marcus placed a single folder on the table. Lila's gaze sharpened. "I thought these things could wait until after my wedding," she said lightly. Today was supposed to be a day of joy. Her words were pointed straight at me, dripping with accusation. Quinn stepped forward. The officer presence was subtle but undeniable. Lila's smile faltered for the first time. "And who is this?" she asked. Marcus answered calmly. "Detective Quinn is here to help ensure everything stays civil and properly documented." Lila stiffened. "Properly documented?" Darren cleared his throat. "Are we in some kind of legal issue?" Quinn fixed him with a steady stare. "That depends on how tonight goes." The tension in the room tightened like an invisible rope. Marcus opened the folder and slid forward the first piece of evidence. The forged insurance policy. Lila's eyes widened just enough to reveal the panic beneath the surface, but she covered it with a tiny laugh. "Oh, please, that is ridiculous. Obviously, someone is framing me." Marcus tapped the bottom corner where the forged signature sat. "This is your handwriting." She shrugged. "Anyone could have copied it." Quinn crossed her arms again. "Including you." Lila flinched. "I do not need insurance money. That does not even make sense." Marcus slid another document forward. The HR request accessing Lydia's DNA file. Then the lab clip. Then another email. Lila glanced at each paper only long enough to know exactly which piece of evidence was being shown. Then her mask slipped. "Enough." Her voice cracked with something raw and furious. "This is absurd. Lydia has been spiraling for months. She begged me for help. She told me she could not handle life alone. Lydia needs supervision. She needs someone reliable, someone stable, someone who understands what she needs. Me." The words hit me like freezing water. Everything in my body trembled. Lila leaned toward me, lowering her voice to a soft, heartbreaking whisper meant for the recording device but designed to fool anyone who might not know her as I did. "Lydia, you told me you were scared of losing control. You told me you were afraid you might hurt yourself one day. That is why I got involved. Not because I wanted to. Because you needed me." My chest shook with silent anger. I opened my mouth, but Quinn subtly shook her head. "Do not engage. Let her talk." Marcus pushed one more item across the table. The audio recording of her conversation with Darren. The room went dead silent. Darren's face drained of color. Lila's pupils enlarged, her breathing hitched. Marcus pressed play. Lila's voice filled the room. "She trusts you because you were her dark past. Use that." Lila shot up from her chair so fast it scraped the floor loudly. "Turn that off." Quinn's voice cut through the air. "Sit down." Lila slowly lowered herself back into the seat, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Marcus pressed play again. Darren's voice followed. "Until it is done." Then Lila again. "You will get your money when it is done." Darren rubbed his forehead, muttering curses under his breath. "I did not think you actually recorded that," Quinn replied. "Always assume someone is recording, especially when committing a crime." Lila's composure shattered. "You do not understand. You do not understand what she is capable of." She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "She ruins everything. She destroys everything she touches." Darren suddenly lunged forward, grabbing for the USB drive on the table. It happened so fast the chair toppled backward. "No, you are not using that." Quinn moved before I could blink. "Hands behind your head. Now!" Darren froze, his chest heaving. Marcus pulled the USB back toward his side of the table. Lila's breathing turned uneven. Her voice broke apart mid-sentence. "You are supposed to listen to me. You owe me your life. You owe me everything." I felt something inside me finally crack, not with pain, but with clarity. "No," I said quietly. "I owe you nothing." Lila's head snapped toward me, eyes blazing with betrayal. "Because of you?" She screamed, "Everything I built is falling apart. You were supposed to disappear. You were supposed to sign the papers. You were supposed to let me be the one who mattered." Her voice rose until it was almost a shriek. "You were never my twin. You were a mistake." Quinn stepped in. "That is enough." Lila shoved the chair back, sending it clattering against the wall. "You think you can take my life from me?" She pointed at the evidence on the table. "All of this means nothing. I will find a way out of this. I always have. Quinn took out her cuffs. Lila Hale, you are under arrest for attempted fraud, identity tampering, and conspiracy to commit harm. Lila backed toward the wall, shaking her head wildly. You cannot arrest me. Not today. Not on my wedding night. Quinn moved toward her, firm and unyielding. The wedding is over. Lila's entire face contorted with rage and desperation. Her voice twisted into a sound I had never heard from another human being. I should have let you drown. The words sliced through the room, and this time, she said in a low whisper, meant only for me. I would not hesitate. Quinn grabbed her wrists and locked the cuffs. Darren cursed loudly, but another officer stepped in to detain him as well. As they were escorted out, the room finally exhaled. I felt my whole body collapse into the chair as Marcus reached over and turned off the recorder, his voice shaking slightly as he whispered, "It is over." The ride to the precinct later that night felt like moving through a strange, echoing tunnel, each sound blurred under the weight of everything that had just unfolded. Detective Quinn drove in silence, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed on the road, with a focus that suggested she was replaying every second of the confrontation to make sure nothing had been missed. I sat in the back seat alone, staring out the window at the glow of streetlights and wondering how a wedding day had turned into a criminal case involving attempted fraud, identity tampering, and a conspiracy that could have cost me my life. At the station, officers escorted Lila and Darren into separate holding rooms. Lila was still wearing her wedding dress, now torn at the sleeve from the struggle in the conference room, the train darkened with dirt, her makeup smeared from both sweat and the emotional breakdown she had barely kept under control. She looked like a ghost of the bride who had walked down the aisle hours earlier, someone whose dream life had shattered in less than a single evening. Darren kept up a steady stream of curses as he was dragged through the hallway, insisting he had been manipulated, that he had only followed orders, that none of this was his idea. His voice carried a loud desperation, but beneath it, I heard something unmistakable. Fear. Real fear. Whatever they had planned had always relied on stealth, on subtlety, on deception, never on being confronted by law enforcement while surrounded by documented evidence. Detective Quinn returned to me after the booking process and handed me a bottle of water. You did incredibly well tonight, Lydia. Her voice, always controlled, had softened. Most people would have run. There was a part of me that wanted to admit that I had wanted to run, that I had wanted nothing more than to flee that conference room and pretend the truth was something simpler and less horrifying. But something within me had shifted. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was the years of being pushed down, dismissed, ignored. Maybe it was the child inside me who had once believed my sister was a hero and who had finally seen the truth. I do not feel brave, I whispered. You were, she said, and you will need to be again, because this is only the beginning. She was right. When the trial date was set a month later, the media got hold of the story almost instantly. A bride arrested on her wedding night for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and attempted harm against her twin sister was the kind of headline news outlets loved. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse on the first day, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward anyone who passed. I arrived with Detective Quinn on one side and Marcus on the other, each acting as a kind of shield. The courtroom itself was larger than I expected, cold and formal, with high ceilings and rows of wooden benches that creaked under the weight of spectators who had come either out of curiosity or moral outrage. When they brought Lila in, the room fell into a stunned hush. Her wedding dress was gone now. She wore a plain beige jumpsuit, her hair pulled tightly back, her wrists cuffed. But even in shackles, she carried herself with the same rigid composure she had always worn like armor. Her eyes swept across the room until they found me. For a split second, something flickered in her expression. I could not tell if it was hatred, regret, or the last fragments of her carefully constructed illusion collapsing around her. Darren was brought in next, dressed in an identical jumpsuit and avoiding Lila's gaze. The prosecution began by presenting the forged insurance documents. The crisp, enlarged images of the policy were projected onto the courtroom screen, showing my name typed neatly above a forged signature that resembled my handwriting almost perfectly. Murmurs rippled through the spectators. Then came the HR request that attempted to access my DNA file, along with the security camera footage of Lila entering the lab after hours. The jury leaned forward in their seats, their faces tightening with each new revelation. Then Marcus was called to the stand. He testified about the break-in at his home, the stolen laptop, the threatening note, and the hacked company server. His voice shook toward the end, the memory still raw and frightening, but he kept his composure. When asked why he risked telling me the truth, he answered simply, because Lydia deserved to know she was in danger. When it was my turn to take the stand, my heartbeat pounded so loudly I wondered if the microphone would pick it up. The prosecutor asked me to explain the months leading up to the wedding, the gaslighting, the sudden missing items, the feeling that I was slowly losing pieces of myself, the renewed contact from Darren under the guise of apology, the fear, the confusion. I described the moment in the conference room when Lila shouted that she should have let me drown as a child, the way her voice cracked with an ugliness I had never heard before. The room was silent when I finished. Then the prosecutor played the recording, the one from the conference room where Lila and Darren incriminated themselves, not knowing the trap they were walking into. The jury stiffened as Lila's voice filled the room. "She trusts you because you were her dark past. Use that." The prosecutor paused the audio and let the silence sink in before pressing play again. "I should have let you drown." Statement by statement, email by email, clip by clip, their entire plan unraveled under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. Darren's attorney tried to paint him as a victim of manipulation, claiming that Lila had threatened him, used his gambling debts against him, and promised to take care of everything if he cooperated. Lila's attorney argued that every piece of evidence was circumstantial, that the recording was taken out of context, that the sisterly fight had been exaggerated by stress and alcohol. But neither argument could touch the mountain of documentation presented by the prosecution, and nothing could erase the recording. On the third day, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty. On all counts. The judge called Lila and Darren forward for sentencing. His voice echoed across the room, steady and stern. Lila Hale. The evidence presented shows premeditation, deception, and a willingness to inflict harm for financial gain. Your actions demonstrate a profound disregard for human life, particularly the life of someone who believed you were her protector. The courtroom was silent. You are sentenced to 15 years in state prison. Lila did not cry. She did not plead. She simply stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched so tightly the muscles trembled. Darren was sentenced next. For your involvement in this conspiracy, for your role in intimidation and attempted violence, this court sentences you to 10 years in state custody. Darren let out a strangled sound, a mix between disbelief and panic, as the officers moved to escort him away. As Lila turned to leave, she looked back at me one last time. Her eyes held no softness, no apology, only a cold fury that felt bottomless. The officers led her through the side door, and the metal latch clicked shut behind her. The sound echoed longer than it should have. When the judge dismissed the court, I remained seated for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway where my sister had disappeared. Marcus placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "It is over, Lydia." But it did not feel like an ending. Not yet. It felt like the moment after a storm ends and the world is quiet, but still broken in places. Still waiting to be rebuilt. When the courtroom finally emptied and the echo of the judge's gavel faded from my ears, I stepped outside, expecting to feel relief wash over me like a warm tide. Instead, the air felt strangely heavy, almost too still, as if the world was holding its breath around me. Flashing lights from the news vans still blinked at the curb, though most reporters had already packed up and left. Detective Quinn stayed close until I reached her car. She offered to drive me home, but the word home no longer held meaning. The townhouse I lived in felt like a museum of old fears, a place where shadows clung to the walls and memories whispered in corners. As we pulled up to my door, she turned to me with a gentleness that contrasted her usual firm tone. "Lydia, your life is your own now. You know that, right?" I nodded, even though I did not fully believe it yet. Trauma complicates freedom. It takes time for the body to catch up with what the mind knows. That night, I packed a suitcase. Not carefully, not thoughtfully, but the way someone escapes a burning building. Clothes, toiletries, my journals, the scrapbook my mother made from childhood photographs, the only things that felt untouched by Lila's attempts to rewrite my life. I left the townhouse before sunrise. I rode through quiet highways until the city shrank behind me. I was drawn to the coast without planning it, letting instinct choose for me. When I reached a small seaside town in North Carolina, the kind of place where wooden boardwalks stretched over grassy dunes and fishermen waved at strangers, something deep inside me exhaled for the first time in years. I rented a tiny cottage by the water, its paint peeling and its roof slightly crooked, but it felt safe in a way I had not felt safe since childhood. The first morning I woke to seagulls calling and the slow crash of waves folding against the shore. The simplicity of the sounds grounded me, reminding me that life could be gentle even after everything had turned sharp. Healing did not come in sweeping cinematic moments. It came in small, quiet steps. I found myself standing on the porch with a cup of tea, watching people walk their dogs on the sandy path below. I jogged along the shoreline, feeling my lungs burn in a way that felt honest rather than frightening. I cooked meals instead of forgetting to eat. I slept without the constant dread of someone breaking in. Yet, trauma has its own timeline. Some mornings I woke up gasping, convinced I still heard Lila's voice telling me I ruined everything. Some nights I dreamed of drowning again, but this time it was not the childhood memory. It was adult Lila's hands pushing me under. But every time the fear rose, something else rose with it. Determination. After a month in the cottage, I signed up for a local support group for survivors of domestic abuse. The meeting took place in the basement of a community center, where folding chairs sat in a loose circle and the smell of old coffee hung in the air. I hesitated at the door, wondering what right I had to be there. My abuser had not been a husband or boyfriend. She had been my sister, someone I once believed would protect me forever. But when I sat down and listened to the stories around me, I realized that abuse has many faces, but the wounds it leaves feel universal. A retired teacher shared how her daughter drained her savings and threatened to abandon her in a nursing home if she did not hand over more money. A firefighter spoke about a partner who isolated him from his family and convinced him he was worthless. A woman my age cried as she described a marriage where her husband monitored every move she made, even tracking her through her phone. Their voices cracked in familiar ways. Their pain echoed mine. For the first time, I did not feel alone in the madness I had lived through. When it was my turn to share, my voice trembled. "My sister tried to destroy my life," I whispered. And she almost did. The room stayed quiet. People did not gasp. They nodded. They understood. Healing also came from the unexpected kindness of strangers. My next-door neighbor, an older woman named Evelyn, brought me a plate of blueberry muffins the day she noticed the moving boxes on my porch. Her smile was warm in a way that made my throat tighten. "You looked like someone who needed something sweet," she said simply. Across the street lived Mr. Rourke, a widower who ran the local bookstore. He lent me a novel one afternoon and said reading is good medicine for people who have lived through storms. I found myself stopping by the bookstore more often sometimes just to sit in the corner reading while Rourke hummed old jazz tunes as he organized shelves. These small gestures stitched pieces of my heart back together. I began painting again, something I had abandoned years ago because Lila always teased me that my art looked like a kid's refrigerator drawings. In the cottage, I spread my supplies across the wooden table and let the colors spill out of me. I painted the ocean at dawn, the curve of the dunes, the quiet resilience of seagrass bending in the wind. My hands steadied the more I painted. My memories softened the longer I stayed. There was one memory, though, that refused to fade. The look in Lila's eyes when she said she should have let me drown. It haunted me like a shadow behind a half-closed door. My therapist in town helped me unpack it piece by piece. "Trauma bonds are powerful," she explained gently. "You believed for years that she saved you. You believed you owed her something. But saving someone does not give you ownership of their life." One afternoon after a storm had rolled through the coast, I walked barefoot along the shoreline. The sand was wet and cool, the sky streaked with pastel pink and orange. I stopped at the water's edge and whispered something I had not been ready to say before. "I am allowed to live." Saying it felt like opening a window after years of breathing stale air. Weeks passed, then months. I rebuilt myself slowly, brick by brick, choice by choice. I learned to trust my instincts again. I learned to enjoy silence without fearing what hid inside it. One morning, as I sat on the porch eating oatmeal with cinnamon, the mail truck pulled up and left a stack of envelopes. Most were mundane utility bills and grocery coupons, but one was unexpected. A handwritten card from Detective Quinn. I opened it carefully. Inside, she had written a single sentence. "You chose survival. Lydia. Be proud of that." Tears rolled down my cheeks before I even finished reading. I kept the card on my nightstand, a reminder that even people who witness horror for a living can see bravery in someone who once felt powerless. The cottage, the sea, the neighbors, the support group, the slow rituals of ordinary life all helped me rebuild something I thought I had lost forever. Myself. I was no longer the sister who lived in Lila's shadow. I was no longer the woman who walked on eggshells afraid of triggering someone else's rage. I was not a victim, not anymore. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the horizon melt into night, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I will not let her define me. I will not let what she did steal any more of my life. For the first time, I felt the truth of it settle peacefully inside me. A rebirth, a beginning. The morning the letter arrived, the sky outside the cottage was a soft gray, the kind that hinted at rain, but held back just long enough to keep the air still and thoughtful. I was sitting at the kitchen counter with a steaming mug of coffee when the mail truck rumbled down the sandy road. I did not expect anything significant. Most days I received nothing more than utility bills, gardening catalogs, and the occasional note from a neighbor inviting me to a potluck. When I stepped outside and retrieved the stack of envelopes, I nearly dropped them when I saw her handwriting on the top envelope. The return address read, North Carolina State Correctional Facility. My breath stalled somewhere between my chest and throat. Even after everything that had happened, even after the sentencing, I never expected to hear from her again. Seeing her handwriting felt like stepping into a cold room after being warm for too long. My palms grew clammy as I carried the letter inside. I stood at the counter for several minutes staring at it, unable to decide whether to open it or tear it apart. Part of me feared the letter would contain more cruelty, more attempts to manipulate more of the psychological warfare she had perfected over our lifetime. Another part feared it would contain an apology I was not ready to accept. In the end, I opened it because I needed to know. Closure comes in many forms, but uncertainty is not one of them. The paper inside was lined and slightly wrinkled as though she had gripped it too tightly while writing. Her handwriting was neat, but smaller, almost fragile. Dear Lydia. Reading my own name in her script sent a strange shiver down my spine. I know you probably never want to hear from me again. I do not blame you. This place forces you to see yourself in ways you never wanted to. The walls are bare, the lights buzz. There is nowhere to hide from what you have done. I read the words slowly, my heart tightening. She continued, I have been going to therapy here, court ordered. They say it is supposed to help. I don't know if it is helping, but it is making me remember things I worked very hard to forget. Like the way you looked at me when we were kids, the way you followed me, the way you trusted me even when I did not deserve it. I did not expect that amount of vulnerability, and it shook me. I had imagined anger, denial, accusations. Not this, she wrote. They diagnosed me with a personality disorder. I do not want you to think that means I am excused from anything. I know I am not. I know exactly what I did. I know what I planned. I know how close I came to destroying you. The line trembled near the end as if her hand had shaken. I read on my pulse thudding behind my ribs. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't ask for it, but I want you to know that I understand now. Every lie, every choice, every manipulation, they were mine, not yours, not Darren's, mine. My breath caught. I had waited years for her to admit ownership of anything harmful she had done. Now that the words sat before me, I did not know how to feel. She continued, I was terrified that everything I worked for would fall apart if the truth about the DNA ever came out. I blamed you for something that was never your fault. I hated the reflection of myself I saw in you. It made me angry in ways I could not understand. I made you small because I felt small. I made you weak because I felt weak. I hurt you to avoid facing the truth of who I was. My hand trembled as I held the page. The honesty was jarring sharp, almost painful. Then came the line that silenced the room completely. I realize now that you were the only person in my life who loved me without condition, and I tried to erase you because I thought you were my flaw. I was wrong. You were the only good thing I had. Tears blurred the ink as I kept reading. The letter went on for several paragraphs, reflecting on her prison experience, her therapy sessions, and her slowly unraveling understanding of herself as both victim and perpetrator in a cycle she never tried to break. In the final paragraph, she wrote, "I don't ask you to write back. I don't ask you to visit. I know I don't deserve either. I just want you to know that for the first time in my life, I see what I became, and I am sorry." The page ended there. No signature. Just the weight of years of unresolved pain condensed into a handful of paragraphs. I folded the letter carefully and stared out the window. The ocean waves were calm, gentle, lapping at the shoreline like they were trying to shape the sand into something new. I sat with the letter for a long time. Grief and relief tangled together inside me until I could not tell them apart. It would have been easier to hold on to anger. Anger is hot. Anger is solid. But the words in that letter softened something I did not know was still hard. Even so, I knew one thing with complete certainty. Closure does not require reconciliation. Healing does not require keeping someone in your life. Forgiveness, if it comes at all, does not require reopening a door that was closed for survival. Finally, with steady hands, I tore the letter into small pieces, not out of hatred, not out of revenge, but out of release. As the paper fluttered into the trash bin, something inside me loosened. A tightness I had carried since childhood finally gave way. Later that evening, I walked along the beach at sunset, the sky streaked with gold and rose, the water reflecting it like molten metal. I felt the breeze move past me gently, as if the world was quietly acknowledging the step I had just taken. As the tide crept up over my feet, I spoke out loud, not to the wind or the waves, but to the version of myself who had once believed that love meant sacrifice and silence. You survived. You walked away. You saved yourself. When I eventually returned to the cottage and sat at my desk, I opened my journal and wrote the words that felt truest. Family is not blood. Family is safety. Family is the people who do not use your fears as leverage or your love as a weapon. In the days that followed, I found myself sharing parts of my story with the support group with Evelyn with Mr. Rourke at the bookstore. Their kindness became the foundation of a new sense of belonging, a kind of chosen family built not from shared DNA, but from shared humanity. One evening, as I sat on my porch with a mug of tea and watched the horizon darken, I felt compelled to speak to you, the person listening to this story. Maybe you found your way here because you have lived through something similar. Maybe someone you loved used loyalty as control or twisted affection into manipulation. If that is you, hear this. If someone uses love as a weapon, you have the right to walk away. You have the right to choose your life over someone else's expectations. You are allowed to save yourself. And there is no shame in that. The world will try to tell you that family is forever. But family is not defined by blood. It is defined by safety, by kindness, by the people who choose not to hurt you even when they know exactly how. If my story opened your eyes or eased your heart, share it with someone who needs it. You never know who is drowning quietly behind a smile. And if you are that person, hold on. Healing is slow, but it comes. It comes in small breaths, in quiet mornings, in kind voices, and in the realization that your life belongs to you. Here is my final message for you, and if this story touched you even a little, I hope you stay with me for one more moment. If you saw yourself in Lydia's silence or her courage, if you have ever felt the weight of a toxic family member trying to rewrite your reality, then I want to hear from you. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is right now, because these stories travel farther than we think, and sometimes your voice becomes the lifeline someone else needs. If you ever escaped a harmful relationship or cut ties with someone who was hurting you, share your experience in the comments. You never know who might read it and feel less alone. And if this true story opened your eyes, gave you strength, or reminded you that your life belongs to you, tap the like button so this message reaches more people who are quietly drowning behind closed doors. Make sure to subscribe if you want more real-life stories that protect, warn, and empower people just like you. Your engagement helps these stories find the ones who need help the most. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember that your peace of mind is worth fighting for no matter who tries to take it from you.